Hey, Ami Canaan Mann. Hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
We are talking to the director of Audrey's Children, which premiered at Tribeca and is going to be opening in movie theaters March 28th. I just watched it. Great job. Obviously, you know what it's about, but our listeners, let's just start. I think a good place to start is just remind them who Dr. Audrey Evans was, based on a true story. So who was Dr. Evans?
Dr. Audrey Evans was an incredible woman. She was a British pediatric oncologist who came to Philadelphia's Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in 1969 and basically set about revolutionizing pediatric care. Specifically, she developed a staging system for neuroblastoma in children. And at the time that she started her work, only about 10% of children would survive, and now it's 80.
Yeah.
So she, and among other many other things, she was just incredible medical revolutionary.
Oh, when that stat flashes up at the end, it's so powerful because it showed not only have we grown to sympathize with the character in the narrative we watch, but when you see the real stats at the end and the opening of the Ronald McDonald House, all of that, and all the faces of the real lives that were touched, and footage of the real Dr. Evans, it really sends it home. You know, it's
Yeah.
so yeah, it's powerful. The work she did for sure. Did you, before we get into the actual narrative of the script, and it was written by Julia Fisher Farbman. Before you actually found the script, though, did you have any personal connections to cancer, or specifically childhood cancer, in your life, or family or friends that drew you to want to do it?
I'm very lucky in that not pediatric cancer. No, my grandmother had breast cancer.
Right.
Sadly, it's just really common. So the thing that really, but I love working with kids. I love children. I love, just anything that focuses on them and helping them. And it was really that scene on the roof that I read in the script where
Hmm.
she is helping a child conceive of their own mortality so that they can sort of better transition.
Right.
Um, and I just thought, my God, like who would want to do that? I mean, that's a really difficult thing to volunteer to do, to set yourself. Nobody wants to have that conversation with a child,
Yeah.
nobody. And here's somebody that did that daily and for decades. And I
Right.
thought, well, this is somebody whose story I really want to help tell.
That is one of the most emotional scenes. I'm glad you mentioned it. And as a filmmaker, I'm sure, like, how many days did you have to wait? Like, oh, the sunset's perfect. Let's run up and shoot. You know what I mean? Like, how did that actually? How much patience did that require?
Well, it's an independent film truly from its inception to its release. So there was no waiting around for the best light. We just had to, it was a make it work moment and it
Yep.
worked beautifully. So I think, so hopefully.
Magic hour is when we make it.
That's right. That's
uh,
exactly right.
I love it. All right, so I alluded to it. I want to get into some more of your directing techniques in a minute, but backing up back to the script. So it's Julia Fisher Farbman. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Um,
Julie Department. Yeah.
so she wrote it. So what? Talk about some more of your impressions of when you actually. I mean, you mentioned the sunset scene is the scene as a character. Were there any other moments, like on the page that made like I thought it was kind of cool how one of the, without any spoilers, let's just say one of the answers or solutions comes from a kid at one scene. Like I think that's kind of
Yeah.
cool that it ties in. We're saving these kids' lives, but they're bringing something to the table too. But how
Yeah.
about you?
Yeah. I love that scene too. I mean, I just, the film, one of the mandates for the film was that we should have no, at one point they were like, we got a scene in a NICU, and so we're gonna get these like, prop babies that are just, toys. And like, I don't think that's gonna work. It was very important to the film to me to have children be as involved in the production as possible.
Yeah.
So a lot of the children actually in the background are from Ronald McDonald House Charities. They're families of people who are currently, working with CHOP to try to, help their children. So it was very important that everything be integrated and everything feel real.
Well, it does, and they add the kids being involved, the actual kids, cancer patients, like you're saying,
Yeah.
add so many layers. It's incredible. All right. Well, how about we can't bury the lead actress, Natalie Dormer. Obviously, everyone remembers from Game of Thrones and a bunch of other stuff. But what's the thought process going into casting her? If she can stand up to that dastardly Joffrey, she can stand up to the patriarchal biomedicine research community. I'm kind of
Yeah.
joking, but kind of not. I don't know, but
It's kind of
I'll turn it
not.
over to you. Yeah. What about her? Skill set do you think spoke to why you thought she'd be perfect for the role?
Yeah, I mean, she's just like she's a ball of fire, right? Like she just, there was a shot I saw her in just that one of the opening sequences of the remake of Picnic at Hanging Rock, and there's a shot that's on her back in that film,
Mhm.
and it's just on her back, and you can just feel on her shoulders like the powerful, and then the camera stops and she just turns, and I'm like, oh, there's Audrey. Like you'd have to have somebody who has where you could really feel them thinking. It's really a biopic about a brilliant kind of awkward revolutionary woman. And so you really needed somebody who you could just were compelled to watch them think on screen and who had a kind of fire about her that felt like a kind of fire that you can empathize with and maybe even see in yourself. And Natalie had all those qualities in addition to, the an unbelievable amount of research that we did and being allowing an actress who would allow themselves to dive so deeply into which can what can be a difficult topic. And that was Natalie all the way through, top to bottom.
Oh, absolutely. And I do, before we get to your, some of the directing techniques, I want to give you your flowers, behind the camera, but one more on the rest of the supporting cast, surrounding Natalie. Jimmy Simpson, of course, is great here. We've seen him in a bunch of stuff, Westworld,
Yeah,
etc. And then of course, Clancy Brown, what was it, Shawshank, and so much other stuff. But talk about sort of, rounding it out, to put all these great actors around, and they each bring something. They each have like a pivotal scene themselves, which I think is really
right.
important. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they both they move the story forward themselves as well.
Thank you. Yeah, Jimmy was my first choice and our first offer, and he said yes. Like
Wow.
I knew that I knew I just love his work, and it was a really tricky role to cast actually because you needed somebody who could go toe to toe with her
Right.
intellectually, because it's an intellectual love story. Like they're falling in love, but they're falling in love with the way each other thinks, which I was really excited to kind of platform because I think it's you're rare you get to see that sometimes between a male female relationship. So you needed somebody who could go toe to toe with her intellectually and also just in terms of their core sense, but not feel dominated her and also not feel like they were dominating. You needed sort of like the second half of a whole. I thought Jimmy just brought that beautifully. And then Clancy is just like salt of the earth. He sort of, first of all, he weirdly looks exactly like C. Everett Koop, but then also he just has that disposition, that kind of gravitas and that kindness and that sweetness just as a person. Brandon Michael Hall is brilliant. Juliana, who plays the little girl, is brilliant. It was a great cast, and I feel really proud of the work that we were all able to do together.
Absolutely. Well, not only is it the cast, but the work you were able to all do together. You put in the work too. So now here, this is a segment of the interview where we give you your flowers for some directing techniques that I thought were really cool. So,
Uh,
not only just some of the compositions, your eye gets to scan the whole image. Like there's some really cool like split screens where you have the child cancer patients kind of talking on the left of the frame in their beds, and then on the right of the frame you have the doctors listening outside of the room on the right. I just love how you kind of have two things happening at the same time. It's really cool, just compositionally. But then even
yeah.
beyond that, I want to give you credit, and maybe it's not intentional. Us film critics always read into stuff, so I just want to see what you think. But the mise en scène, and I know you're into it because you before the interview started, you moved a pillow on the couch behind you, so you're aware of what's going on in the frame. Um, but there's the scene you were talking about, the romance with Jimmy and her, and how it sort of develops. There's that first scene where it's like a shot of a mouse in a cage between them, and she thinks, "Oh God, here's this male researcher. You're asking me for a favor. What am I gonna have to do to get your help?" But really, he's just actually trying to help. But you have this shot, that moment before when she's worried, you kind of cut to a two shot, and there's a cage with a mouse in between them. Is there anything symbolic you're trying to go for that? Is that, is she feeling trapped? She's worried that he's going to be just like all the rest of them. I don't know. Is there anything you're going for?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's actually really, yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm very, as a director, I tend to be, I started out as a still photographer. Like, I was that weird punk rock girl smoking cigarettes and listening to the Violent Femmes in my dark room in Indiana, which is where I grew up. So I'm kind of a lens nerd and a camera nerd and a sound nerd. And
Yeah.
just, so the mise en scène I don't know, I just am always kind of in awe of the information that you can convey by the
Mhm.
placement of objects within a finite frame. And I feel like, humans are just incredibly adept at being able to, even if it's not, even if they're not literally, cognitively, consciously understanding why something is the way they feel it.
Absolutely.
So to
Like
your
it
point,
works on our subconscious, I think.
I think it does. And doesn't it sort of in life too? I mean, we just
Yeah.
sort of we go down an alley and we see the thing. We're like, I don't think this is a great alley to go down. And we see something we're like this actually feels better to me. And I think that's sort of like filmmaking is a weird kind of, I don't know, consolidation of that phenomena. And which makes it so much fun to do and such a great puzzle and a great challenge. But so in that scene, yes, exactly. Like I wanted them on opposite sides of the frame, but yet there was something that felt like there was something common that was
Mhm.
uniting them to kind of foreshadow the unity that they come to later.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted it to be mostly, I shot coverage, but I knew when I was shooting it that editorially I'd want to stay in that two shot because I also felt like having such a vast space in that frame, your eye kind of did the cutting. Like you
Yeah.
go to, and then you kind of look at him to see what he was going to say, and then you look at her to see how she was going to react, and then you felt like you were the third person in the conversation, which is what I wanted, as opposed to it's a shot of her, it's a shot of him,
Yeah.
and I felt like the frame itself was building a kind of innate, inherent tension. So I love that you felt that. That's great. Thank you.
Well, I just like yeah, you and I are trained to look for that stuff, or in your case, put it in there. But I love what you're saying about even the most populist reading of movies. Even if you're like, oh, that's a bunch of crap. No, I agree. It works on our subconscious. Like, and so
Yeah.
I always try to point out this stuff. It this your movie is completely different than what I'm about to say, obviously, but it reminded me of a scene in of Rocky of all things when first goes in Adrian's pet shop and she's like Alvinson shoots it through a cage of like
Yeah.
a bird cage and she's like caged, but then Alvinson pans to a mirror and Rocky and Adrian are outside the cage when they're together. Like he helps her escape and she helps him escape, and then we pan back when they're anyway. But there's all
Yeah.
even in the most populous movies like a blockbuster
Yeah.
like that, there's cool stuff going on, and so I noticed it in Audrey's Children, and I wanted to give you a shout out. So it's awesome. Um,
Oh,
Great. Well, you're talking about how, some of your childhood inspirations that you said you grew up in Indiana, was it? You said in the
yeah.
dark rooms. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you were born in London, right? In
Yeah.
9. But all right. And so you're growing up in Indiana. Um at what age do you realize dad's a famous director? I guess you're 12 when he does James Caan in Thief, right? In 81. And what, 15 when he starts executive producing Miami Vice on TV. So are you growing up watching those episodes? Are you going to
No,
Thief in the theater, or are you completely removed from it?
I'm pretty removed from it. Like it was weird. I had big culture shock when I came to LA. I went to USC Film School and I was like,
Yeah.
wait, what? So like it was a real culture shock.
Ben Mankiewicz said the same thing, by the way. He was like, grew up in DC. I didn't know my family's history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird, which is weird. It's a weird phenomenon, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to a small, grew up in a very small town. It's like 900 people, like really small. And then my high school was in West Lafayette, Indiana, which is where Purdue University is. We had 400 kids in the house, actually like a really good high school. But like the kids with the famous parents were the ones who was like the head of the biology at
Sure.
Purdue. I
Yeah.
was, so
Right.
when I was going to go to USC, everybody was like, why are you going to go to University of South Carolina? Like nobody, it just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Um, at all. So I'm gonna say like I didn't really get it until I came out here when I was 17.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I knew he did. I mean, I knew he did film, but it didn't. I wasn't. I didn't. I just didn't get it.
Yeah. 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 But I mean, I'm sure you quickly did slowly start to get it. But so yeah, I would love to. I know there's no. I want to paint your film history journey on one timeline, but I know there's really no way to, at least without paralleling like sort of where dad was at the time. So I'm gonna
Mhm.
try to definitely do it. So like, I guess to the point you're making, what before we get to the films you made, because I guess I'm trying to go chronologically. There's a parallel here. Um, did you have like favorite movies of your dad growing up, and how did that shift maybe once you got into college and started looking with a more critical eye, kind of the stuff you and I were just talking about? You know what I mean? Like, has your dad's your thoughts on dad's certain movies, like have certain ones rose and fell as you've matured as a filmmaker?
Well, he was making most of the movies that we know now while I was when I was an adult.
Right,
Because as you say, like Miami Vice was happening, I was already 17.
right,
And so Mohicans and all that was happening when I was so I didn't really grow up with,
sure,
I was already. I was already grown,
You already.
which actually I think, ended up being really interesting for me. Lucky for me. I don't think it
Yeah.
was designed that way necessarily, but it was lucky. I knew that I wanted to, because this is why I was lucky. I knew that I wanted to work on one movie that he of his with, not alongside him obviously, but like just in the just see like how it worked from top to bottom, and that ended up being Heat.
That's
And
a great one to pick.
I know that's what I'm
Might be the
saying.
best of all of
Lucky.
them, but yeah.
Yeah, I have a real soft spot for that film.
Yeah.
So it timed out well. I was in my 20s already. I think I was like 26 or something when we were doing Heat. So I was old enough to, so I was lucky in that I was old enough to be able to, I was an assistant to the line producer who
Yeah.
already had an assistant that did assistancy stuff. So I was like, they would be like, Amy, go get a gyroscopic helicopter mount and figure out how to get Val and Bob into Folsom Prison to talk to inmates. And that was kind of my job, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky in that I didn't grow up with an awareness of because he wasn't doing feature films yet,
Sure,
and
sure.
the time he was, I was old enough to be able to work on Heat, which was great.
That's so cool. I mean, not only the Pacino and De Niro in the same film with the first time. Well, I mean, Godfather 2 counts, but they were in different timelines. But
Yeah,
then,
yeah,
but to be, seeing partners cut, it was amazing, and just the way your dad shoots some of those, like, what is it, like a robbery sequence? It's unbelievable. And we just had Hank Azaria on a couple weeks ago, and he was raving about working with your dad on Heat.
oh yeah,
But it's cool. So you're working a little bit, but weren't you also like even before? Didn't you do like Crime Story? Weren't you like a PA in the art department as well? Was that
yeah.
slightly
So when I was
before?
yeah, it was like, do you want this summer job in Chicago? Because Chicago is where my grandmother was from,
Yeah.
and Indiana's like 2 hours away. So I would spend a lot of time in Chicago. Yeah, so he wasn't on set that he was doing a feature. He was doing maybe he was shooting Mohegan Sun, I can't remember. But
Yeah.
they were like, yeah, so I got paid $40 a week, which was like so much money to me. And I worked in our department and loved it and completely fell in love with like that's when I didn't really I thought I was going to be a photojournalist because
Mhm.
I was a little bit obsessed with words and I was a little bit obsessed with images and I
Yeah.
didn't really know how those could come together. So I thought I would end up going to journalism school. And
Mm.
then when I worked on Crime Story, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's set in the 1950s, and it's just like we've made 1950s out of nothing. I just completely ran away with the circus. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is my dream. And in
Yeah.
fact, I remember having a conversation with I don't think it was Dennis Farina, but it was one of the leads where I was like, I don't think I need to go back to high school. I think I'm good. And they were like, no, you got to
They're
graduate high
not going
school.
to teach me anything I need. I'm
I,
good. On the
I
set is where
know. I'm good. I know what I want to
I know what I
do.
want to do. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that was kind of like the beginning. I
Right.
think I was almost 17. So that was like
Okay.
the beginning of me understanding film and
And that TV series was 86, right? So that's the same year Dad's doing Manhunter, I guess, which obviously Silence of the Lambs would become a huge
yeah.
phenomenon, deservedly. But I invite everyone to go back and check out Manhunter, which I guess was technically the first version of the Hannibal Lecter and Cox long before Succession, crushing it. It's a great movie, and I think of blue. Whenever I think of that, I think of your dad's like blue lighting. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
a tone. It's very stylish. Anyway, but so you're doing he's doing that. You're doing Crime Story. We're PAing on it. And then you mentioned Last of the Mohicans, of course, and then Heat. And then, but I wanted to ask you about The Insider because when you said journalism, did The Insider really click for you? Because that's one of the more underrated ones. Well, I mean, it was rated at the time, but like not Oscar nominees, but the idea of journalism ethics, did that really speak to you?
Definitely. I mean, Inside is one of my Inside is a great film. And
Unbelievable.
and in terms of journalism ethics, I mean, it just speaks, it resonates through the decades. I mean, now more than ever, um, the approach that journalists need to take in
Yeah.
terms of what we say, how we say it, what we reveal, and what needs to be revealed, and how critical they are to the society we're living in is more potent and important
Yeah.
now than ever.
Yeah, Al
Yeah.
Pacino in that movie as getting Russell Crowe's character inside the insider inside Big Tobacco
Mhm.
to want to go on the record with 60 Minutes, and then Mike Wallace and them trying to actually it's more CBS execs trying to stifle the story. Yes, it's night and day compared, and now add 26 years on top of it. It's almost depressing how much journalism ethics we've lost since that movie. But
Well, they're fighting. I think they're fighting the fight, but boy, I
yeah,
mean,
they're
if
trying.
right, like if Insider was a story about, as you're saying, corporations trying to, I mean, now it's like that times 100, right? I mean, that's the danger of the fourth estate, the
Absolutely.
media is I mean, I think they're fighting. and we need them to continue to fight.
Absolutely. Now
We
more
need
than
hope.
ever. But that makes
Yeah.
everyone go back and watch Insider. I think it's in
Yeah.
your dad's filmography, and there's great ones, Ali, Collateral, that would come after that. But I think that's like a I don't want to say hidden gem, but I want to really want to hold it up. I love it. All right, so around the time, I guess, right after Insider, then, and I guess right before your dad's with Will Smith on Ali, right in there is when you write your NYPD Blue episode, right? This was Tea and Sympathy in like 2000. I guess that's about right, somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
that's right. That seems right. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was
Yeah.
it? What was the experience like? And I promise we're building to your first feature morning and right after that. But I
But
guess this is like your first big, I don't want to call it break, but you know what I mean? Watching
yeah.
Dennis Friends and the great, reading words you wrote in that episode. I mean, just remember memories of that experience.
Oh, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, Milch had read, I went to film school in the production program, and I uh, wrote I don't know if anyone's a USC film buff, but there's a thing called a 480, which is like, only four people get to do this big deal. So I wrote one, and then I wrote and directed one, and one, he read mine, or maybe, yeah, I think that's right. And then, it was great working with him. I mean, I wrote the script, and he's brilliant, Milch. And I was on set. That was like a thing. You're like, oh my God, they're saying my words. I mean, that was amazing. I mean, it was
Yeah.
huge. I remember I did not turn off my cell phone, and my cell phone rang during a take. That was embarrassing. And so it
Mine
was
went off during this interview. I'm gonna edit it out.
okay. There we go.
Uh,
Yeah.
what
That
we
was
all
incredible.
we you keep learning, you know what I mean? What not to do.
Yes, we do. I think I
And
would
that
have known.
actually, that's a good question. I wasn't even going to think to ask this, but I wanted to touch on you writing and directing your debut film, Morning, in 2001, about a man returning to his small town roots, following the death of a childhood friend.
Yeah.
I guess this would be your equivalent of Thief, I guess, right? This is launching your career, but yeah, I guess just looking back on it, obviously it holds a special place in your heart. Is there anything you were talking about when your cell phone going off on set of NYPD Blue? But is there anything looking back where you're like, man, if I only knew now Audrey's children version of Amy, what would I apply back to Morning? It's
Oh my God.
a hard question.
Everything. Like
Everything.
you
Yeah.
know, I mean, I think that I'm a real, I really believe that filmmaking, storytelling, with your director, writer, editor, grip, one of the things I love about filmmaking is that it is a craft in the sort of medieval sense of we are making shoes and we need a mentor and a mentee kind of craft.
Yeah.
It just, um, so much of what you learn is just being on the job, and you don't learn it necessarily in books, and you learn it
Yeah.
by watching other people make mistakes, making your own mistakes, you really, I just love the system of, generate when I see generations of electricians, and it's like,
Yeah.
here's the grandpa and the dad, and it's just and it's the kind of skill sets that every crew member brings to a film are, again, just not written anywhere. They're just
Yeah.
handed down, and they kind of the conflation of all those skill sets is what makes the film possible. And we all know, like, the film is on in every capacity, director and every crew member and actors, it is tenacity and know-how and wisdom, and just, oh, I was in this situation 5 years ago and this happened, so let's try this. It's
Right.
all those kind of beautiful historical problem solvings. So as a director, I by design did 5 years of TV because I wanted boots on the ground, low stakes
Yeah.
experiences to learn, because I'm just convinced that that's really
Yeah.
the way to do it. And independent film, the stakes are so high. You do a film and it doesn't, you may not get to know the movie.
Yeah.
So I was like, let me just do TV, where it's like I get to exercise different skill sets, learn different approaches, from House of Cards to Queen of the South, which are shot completely differently. So you
Sure.
don't get all the tools in your toolbox. And I don't know, for me, it was just an incredible 5 years. And then after that 5 years, I did a Netflix pilot. I'm jumping ahead of your timeline. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
And,
You know, we
and
we
then
we,
and then
we
to
can go
Audrey.
back.
Okay, good. And then to Audrey's Children. So to answer your
Sure.
question, yeah, all of that helped me get to Audrey's Children.
Yeah.
And then I guess your cruel question is, would I go back and redo? Yes, all of them, based on what I know now. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're still probably proud of some of the shots and
Oh, for
things that you
sure.
did. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
because every movie is just a recording of the plateau that you're at that point
where
at,
you
and
were in that. Yeah,
in
yeah.
that
And
moment.
exactly. And but you're putting in your 10,000 hours in TV and all that stuff. And like you're saying, every crew member is also doing that to the
Yes.
point where it's a huge collaborative effort and you're making these instinctual decisions of lighting and setups on the fly in a lot of cases, but it's all based on this amalgamation of all of your experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's awesome. Well, I did want to I want to shout out Texas Killing Fields. I guess a decade after Morning, right? It plays at Venice Film Festival. That's a pretty big deal. Who was in that? Sam Worthington, Jessica Chastain before she really, before Oscar winning.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Chloe. There was a ton of people in.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. How do you think a decade after Morning, you think you had matured? We're talking about every year you add more to your repertoire, but how do you think you had matured by that point?
I think at that point, I'd done all these years of writing. I was a TV pilot writer. I did Nancy Drew for ABC. Got that job, which was incredible. They liked my pitch, which was like turning, go back to the 1930s original text because the original text of Nancy Drew is
Yeah.
pretty great. And then I sold a bunch of pilots, and then I sort of switched to I was a studio writer, and worked for Nina Jacobson and New Line and all this stuff. And so there was so much, and all my projects that I wrote tended to be really research heavy. They tended to be, which tends to be my sort of, if there's a constancy in my work, I think that's probably it. Like it tended to be like, go to Georgia and hang out with pregnant female pool hustlers and write a movie about that. It was that kind of like intensive research stuff. So by the time I got to Texas Killing Fields, which was based on a series of true crimes, I think that I was able to accumulatively, the script was written by a guy who was a, ex-policeman, and it was his first screenplay. So I think I was able to, and I didn't want to rewrite him, but I did need to edit him because if you put the margins in the proper order, his original screenplay was like 160 pages long. So I was like, okay, I was able to kind of like create a kind of structure and approach to it,
Yeah.
which I don't know that I could have done. And also without having all those years of being a writer. Um, and also just sort of being aware of how to integrate real events into a narrative story that felt compelling.
Yeah. Well, what's cool when you look down your filmography, it's how adept you've been at different, at different genres. Because you do Morning, and then you have Audrey's Children on the most recent end, and then you've got like a true crime, like crime Texas Killing Fields kind of vibe. You got romances like Jackie and Ryan with Katherine Heigl. It's like you can tackle pretty much any genre. So hats
Oh,
off
thank you.
to that.
Thank you.
I know we're sort of up against the clock. I see the Zoom timer ticking in my face into the 60 minutes. Um, but I guess I've asked a lot about you know which of your dad's films, but let's go beyond that. Other than your dad, we're tabling that. Which other filmmakers do you think were really influential on you? Either growing up watching movies, it could just be like, oh, as a kid, I loved watching this blockbuster, or as USC Film School on, like when you really get into the art and craft of it. Like, which filmmakers do you think are your goats?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, right? We are
Yeah,
definitely standing on the shoulders of giants here,
yeah,
I
totally.
mean, and I had the weird advantage of not growing up as a cinephile because I grew up in like when I was little, we had literally one channel on our TV, so it
Mm.
wasn't like it was always books for me. So which was great because it meant that when I got to film school, I was sort of like, oh my God, have you guys heard about this guy who directed this movie 400 Blows? Like I was just sort of blown away by everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Who's this Francois Truffaut guy?
right? Like, oh my God, you
Yeah,
guys, have you heard of him? Um, but for me, I think like there's so many goats, the ones off the top of my head, and we're gonna hang up, and I'm gonna be like, wait, there's 10
yeah,
others. A
yeah.
big one for me is Frank Capra, actually.
Oh, I love Frank Capra so much.
Capra's huge for me,
Yeah.
huge, because he did what I sort of aspire to do in that he took really difficult subject matter,
Oh yeah.
and like highly political subject matter,
Oh yeah.
and 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 couched it in like charm and humor
Yep.
and like or like something compelling, visually
Yeah.
compelling. And
Like
so by
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is very political, and in
super
or
political.
all of his movies, because you think of your It Happened One Nights and all the rom com stuff and Of course, It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
obviously, but that It's a Wonderful Life is very that's darker than it is the Christmas classic we
That
remember. It's a masterpiece.
it's a
Um,
critique of capitalism. It's a wonderful,
absolutely,
absolute critique
absolutely.
of capitalism. Yeah.
From the Charleston dancing, to the wartime, pre-war, post-war, run on the banks, everything. It's a
Yeah.
masterpiece, I think.
I agree.
And by the way, did you notice we're talking mise en scène? You notice when George jumps in to save Clarence when they're drying off with the campfire, there's like a clothesline that's diagonal in the frame, and the angel Clarence is above the line, and George is the mortal below the line. Check it out. I love it. I just
I'm
find
gonna
these weird
look
things like
at that.
my mouse cage. But
Yeah.
meet John Doe and Mr. Deeds. There's so many.
So many.
Unbelievable career.
I
But
agree.
so Capra. All right. Who any
Kappa.
others? Any others?
I'm gonna say I've been thinking about Barbara Koppel a lot lately,
Oh
Harlan County,
yeah.
USA,
Yeah.
because she sort of has the, like so deep, right?
Yeah.
So deep and her subject matter, obviously, and able to take a highly politicized topic
Yeah.
and make it character based, and it's a documentary. Like,
Yeah.
she
Harlan
just
County, USA is unbelievable. You gotta
beautiful
watch it,
film.
people.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful film. And I think, again, really timely. I think actually what the country's going through right now is sort of the seed of that
Yeah.
conflict
Yeah.
is in the late 70s, early 80s, and in the time of Harlan County, USA. I think if you want to understand what's going on politically now, watch that film.
There you
Um,
go. There's a recommendation. Wait, I'm trying to remember what movie she came on our show to do. Oh, it was Desert One. It was the documentary about the sadly the failed mission under Jimmy Carter to rescue
yes,
the
which I haven't seen. I haven't seen it. Yeah.
the Iran hostage crisis. There you go.
Yeah.
It's great. But okay, so Frank Capra, Barbara Koppel. This actually makes sense when you watch Audrey's Children. I'm seeing the influences here. All right. Any others? We're just geeking out at this point.
I mean, like the French New Wave, I
Yeah.
really just love. I mean, like any movie in the French New Wave,
Yeah.
honestly. I just love again, actually, what they're doing with mise en scène that feels organic.
Yeah.
Right. So, and also sort of, hey, we're in the midst of the terrible tragedy of the post-war, Europe.
Yeah.
But let's see if we can find the humanity in that and
Yeah.
understand our context through the characters that we're
Yeah.
identifying with. Um,
And it was a cool when you said post-war, like the Rossellini's and Italian neorealism like dealt with that in one way, right? Like we're really gonna chronicle this, and then what you're saying, there are these new wave masters that come out of it, probably because they're all right. They're all looking back at all our film noir movies, right? Because German occupation ends, and some of these French critics are like, oh. Let's go back and watch all these movies that we haven't been able to see, and they coined the phrase film noir, and then they
right.
themselves do all these cool rule breaking stuff in the new wave with. Are you said Truffaut? Are you Truffaut, Godard, Renee, Varda? Gosh.
I mean, kind of honestly, all of them. Have you
Yeah.
seen Elevator to the Gallows? Do you know
I
that
haven't.
one?
No, no, no. I
Oh,
haven't.
yeah, you got to see. I mean, I can't pronounce it in French, but it's Elevator to the Gallows, but it's really worth seeing. And it's got a score by Miles Davis, like this
Oh, this is
beautiful.
A Mal, Louis Mal film.
Yeah, yeah. It's gorgeous. So that, but then also like I love American film noir too, which I don't think you can do again. I think it really was specific to that era. But
Sure.
like, Mitchum and
Oh, got it.
Barbara Stanwyck and like, all of those guys.
Oh,
And
yeah.
also like I think I love Kubrick's sort of, I mean, obviously he's brilliant, but one of the things I really love about Kubrick is did, he also, um, I am trying to emulate what Kubrick does in that he is sort of, let me see if I can do film noir, let me see me do horror, let me
Oh, the
see,
genres. Yeah.
right. You're just sort of like picking a genre and sort of viewing. I mean, I don't really know, I wouldn't pretend to understand or know his approach and what he was thinking there. But for me, I think like, right, what are the mechanics of a genre and how can I embody that genre in the story in my own particular point of view. I think that's just sort of interesting and fascinating to break down.
Such a good point because with Kubrick, you're like, oh, think of what is arguably one of the greatest horror movies. Oh, he made The Shining. What's one of the greatest sci-fi? Oh, 2001,
Right.
definitely. Or
Yeah.
sword and sandal epics like Spartacus, or you know what I mean, or Paths of Glory. Like he could Barry Lyndon. Like these are all very different genres and but still masterful. Oh, Full Metal Jacket, a war movie. Like, come on.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. Well, you've
Yeah.
thrown out a lot of masters that are great. So yeah, French New Wave, Koppel, Capra, Kubrick, they're all swirling around in your brain. Um, Well, if we had to, if you had to pick a Mount Rushmore of dad's movies, what would the four be? It's tough. We're ending on a tough one.
Of my dad's
Of your
movies?
dad, yeah.
Boy, I just don't think I can. I don't know that I could. I'm not a big like sort of
Yeah,
uh
ranking.
best
Yeah.
best of
Sure.
ranking
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I would just say, like as I said before, I think for me, for really sort of personal reasons that are just because it would have to be Heat, but that's because I worked on it for a year and a half,
Yeah.
and I
It's great
think
though.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
and
objectively great.
yeah, and I agree. And for what we were talking about, The Insider, I think is really important. I mean, I think it's important to revisit that movie in terms of what we were talking about, what's happening right now,
Yeah.
in journalism. Yeah,
The Pacino ones rise for you up
yeah,
there.
I get, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, yeah,
But they're all great. I love Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx and Collateral.
yeah, they're great.
Like I think back to when I first watched these movies, growing up or recently, and I'm just like, man, it's hard to. You can't ranking is kind of, it's pointless, really. Like with Capra, we just named 10 to me, or I don't know, 5, 7
And
great
they're
movies,
all
and
worth seeing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, that's great. Well, for you, Audrey's Children. Is that your? I don't. We can't even see. There's no ranking, but you're saying you're improving each year. So you know what I mean.
I like to think so. I
By
don't know
that
if I,
metric, this is your
I
most
try.
mature work, right? Until we talk to you 10 years from now, I'm sure it'll just keep getting better and better. But I guess in
Yeah.
final seconds, invite our listeners out to on March 28th to go see Audrey's Children. I mean, and let's pitch it this way. It might sound like a heavy topic because it is childhood cancer. There are sad moments, obviously, but it's inspirational. You're going from 10% survival to 80%. So yeah, sell them on going to the movie theater to see the inspiration in this thing.
I would just say that, like, the objective of the movie, that my sort because it can be a heavy topic, the
Yeah.
goal was to create a world that was so viscerally complete that you feel like you're in Philadelphia in 1969, that you kind of are drawn into and kind of seduced by the world and the characters who are lovely, performed by this amazing cast, and led by Natalie Dormer. And so, come see it for the cast, come see it for the world. And at the end, you'll have heard a story about kids with cancer, but you won't know that while you're watching.
And come see it for Ami Canaan Mann's direction of Audrey's Children in theaters March 28th. Thank you so much for doing this. It's gonna kick me off, but I could talk all day. Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.